I'm scheduled to be on Fox News Channel late tonight talking about the election results across the United States. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of a preview of what I anticipate saying. Of course, what I'm going to say is going to turn dramatically on breaking news today with the elections and any lawsuits arising from that. But I want to give you just a little taste of what I suspect I'm going to have to get into late tonight. Hopefully it'll be an exciting good news night and not a bad news night, but only time will tell. Stay tuned. I'll talk about it and when I get back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, constitutional attorney, and New York Times best-selling author. If you have not subscribed to the Four Boxes Diner Second Amendment channel, please do so and show your love for the right to keep and bear arms. Okay folks, I'm going to make this quick. I know there's a lot of news out there about the election, and again, obviously, I'm sure you're getting all sorts of information from different sources. That's all great, but the bottom line is I'm going to appear tonight on the Fox News channel late tonight talking about the election results. I may be on for a while. We'll see how the breaking news and everything else goes. You never know with breaking news in the news cycle. With that said, I'm scheduled to be on tonight, so maybe I'll see some of you guys on TV in a little bit. But I want to just give you kind of the highlights of what I want to say, not making any particular predictions about what's going to happen. It's impossible to know the future. The old joke we've talked about on this channel is that the history of the future has yet to be written. That's certainly the case with this election cycle as well as many other things involving history and the future of America. But I do want to give you just a couple quick thoughts. First of all, in terms of the key races, I think you need to look carefully at early on to see where the trend is. Is the trend going to be our friend for the Second Amendment or not? I think the first thing is take a look at how gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin does against Kathy Hochul in New York. If he puts up a strong performance or even wins, that will be a very good indication that it's going to be a positive night for Republicans across the board. Also, take a look at Michigan. Michigan's going to be very interesting. You have Gretchen Whitmer there against Tudor Dixon. If Dixon puts up a strong performance and wins, that will be a very big deal and a huge sign in favor of Republicans for election night tonight. This is particularly the case where they are one of the contested states, if you will, where abortion is actually on the ballot specifically. There's a referendum out there. We'll see how abortion cuts. In my experience, abortion doesn't cut in favor of the left as much as the left likes to talk about it in the press for two major reasons. They always think it's all about the women, but keep in mind that women spend the vast majority of their life, as other people observed, engaged in other activities besides the activity of abortion. They obviously deal with mortgage issues. They pay gas prices. They fill up their family cars with gas. They have to watch, the kids and help maintain a family and pay all those bills. So that's a lot of other issues besides abortion that women have to concern about, which is really where I think the left likes to focus on the abortion issue to try to pick off suburban women. That's where they laser focus. But suburban women have a lot more complexity in their lives than a single issue of abortion. I will say what's interesting, though, to the extent that abortion, and you can look at the data on this, to the extent that abortion is a single issue, to the extent it really drives people out. Surprisingly, the pro-life movement is a little bit like the Second Amendment movement, meaning you have the vast majority of them are single-issue voters on the issue of abortion. So strangely enough, abortion doesn't necessarily cut in favor of the left as much as one might think if you actually look at the data. But let me carry on. What's interesting about Pennsylvania, obviously the Senate race between Dr. Oz and Fetterman is a huge deal. What's very interesting was a decision made in a lawsuit yesterday by Fetterman's camp to bring a federal lawsuit challenging certain aspects of Pennsylvania state law involving how to count mail-in ballots that were missing, for example, a date or other information. I find it very interesting that Fetterman brought what I consider to be somewhat of a Hail Mary lawsuit the day before the election. It makes me wonder whether or not Fetterman's internal polling suggests that there's some trouble out there and they're going to need to pick off a few additional votes. Only time will tell, but I thought that federal lawsuit that Fetterman brought in Pennsylvania involving that state law looked to be a little bit of a Hail Mary pass, and we'll see what happens. Now, in terms of possible other good things or bad news to watch, to the extent there's early bad news against, I would say, Republicans, I think a very fast loss in New Hampshire for Don Bolduc against the incumbent Democrat Maggie Hassan would be very bad. I think that would be a sign of things to come potentially tonight as a harbinger of things to come if Don Bolduc, the Republican, loses in New Hampshire quickly. I think if you actually look at the House race in Long Island between George Santos and Robert Zimmerman, Zimmerman being the Democrat, I think that the way that race goes early could also tell us where the rest of the night's going to go. And of course, we know that if you look at Pennsylvania, if Dr. Oz performs well today on election day, that's going to be a strong indication we're going to have a strong performance across the country. But again, only time will tell. We'll see. I do want to make a couple other just observations about what's going on tonight. It is ironic. Keep in mind that the Democrats literally spent tens of millions of dollars. It's unclear the total amount, but it certainly looks to be somewhere north of $20 million that the Democrats spent interfering, meddling with, whatever the word is you want to use, basically being involved with Republican primaries. This is important because the Democrats basically made it be known that wherever they could influence who was picked, they wanted to pick the most conservative, quote-unquote, unelectable Republican in the primaries, and the Democrats were bragging about this. But if you look at a place like New Hampshire, where Don Bolduc was one of the people that benefited from that sort of Democratic push, the Democratic funds against his opponents, well, it turns out that Don Bolduc may win in New Hampshire, which means that this will totally backfire. I should also mention a little bit of irony here. It's interesting that the Democrats funded some of these candidates. I think they funded somewhere on the order of 19 different races, something like that. Don't quote me on the exact number, but it's a pretty big number of races they helped fund or influence or participate in, whatever you want to use as the word, that they got involved with a bunch of these different Republican primary races. And what's interesting is that after a lot of these Republicans won the primaries, then you sort of saw an attack from the left on some of these people as them being quote-unquote election deniers. But of course, these so-called election deniers, which of course is an absurd term of opprobrium and not really accurate. But anyway, it's neither here nor there for now. It's a propaganda reference, not unusual for the left to use propaganda to advance the ball. That's how they function. No big deal. That's what they do. But I find it interesting that they helped get some of these people nominated. Then they immediately start attacking them as election deniers and bad people, even though they use Democratic left-wing progressive type monies to prop them up in the primary. So we'll see if that strategy backfires or if it pays off for the Democrats. Only time will tell. I do want to make a couple other quick observations that we should be watching out for. You're going to see a lot of discussion on MSNBC and CNN about so-called Secretary of State positions. They're going to say that a lot of people that are quote-unquote election deniers are running for Secretary of State and other state-held offices. Again, set aside the propaganda. The reality is, although Secretary of State positions are very important, in many respects, the law in a particular state is black and white. People have to follow it. The Secretary of State, whoever is elected, has to follow it. So it's not crystal clear to me why whoever wins the Secretary of State positions in these various states is going to turn out to be hugely important for the 2024 presidential election cycle, but only time will tell on that as well. Okay, one final comment about debates involving early voting. The fact is, in many states, you have early voting. Historically, you only had two ways to vote. You had in-person election day voting, and then if you were sick or you had some other reason to vote absentee, you had to submit an excuse, get the ballot and vote absentee. Those were the two ways. But in the past several years, including thanks to COVID, it accelerated a trend toward mail-in ballots where people could vote literally weeks before election day. So far, if you look at the data, it seems to me that the Democrats benefit from pre-election day mail-in ballots more than Republicans do. You can debate the merits of all that, but I'm not going to get into that right now. That's not the purpose of it, because the law is the law. We have to deal with it. But I will say what's interesting is that the critical thing, as I see it, is to the extent you have some sort of early voting, it really should be very close to election day. It shouldn't be months in advance, because, for example, in Pennsylvania, Fetterman had that terrible debate performance, and as my understanding, that at the time he had that terrible debate performance, 600,000 ballots had already gone out the door and been cast. So 600,000 people, was by what I read in Pennsylvania, were not able to assess the Fetterman debate performance when they voted, because this late breaking news they don't get to benefit from one way or the other because they've already voted. So I think that's kind of a negative. And of course, one wonders why anyone in America needs 6 weeks to cast a single ballot. It seems to me that you shouldn't need more than a week or two, practically speaking, for mail-in. Why would it extend the time? But beyond that, I would say that the one other thing that's critically important is not just when you are able to vote. It's equally important, in my opinion, as to when your ballots are counted. Right now, for example, in places like Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, ballots can come in after Election Day. They get counted, for a week or more after Election Day. I don't think that's a good idea at all for several reasons. First of all, I think the Florida approach, which says that once the mail-in ballots start arriving in the door, they can start counting them 2 or 3 weeks before Election Day, and that's critically important for several reasons. One of which, of course, is that it doesn't allow for shenanigans in terms of, on Election Day, how many votes someone is ahead, so you can go, quote unquote, find the ballots, find the votes after Election Day. Even if that's not happening, it creates the perception, the public perception that games like that get played. And remember, as I see it, it's not just that the process of voting is fair. The process of voting also has to appear fair to outside observers. It's the same thing with the court. We don't just want a court lawsuit to be fair or a criminal case to be fair. It has to be fair and just, yes, but we also want the public to respect the process and to view it as fair, even if it doesn't get the outcome they want. This is why in a court of law, it's always open to the public. You can go to trials, you can watch trials. It's always public so people can watch. Now here, of course, when you have these weeks after Election Day where people are voting, transparency may not be as clear as it should be. And again, there may be some excuses for that. It could be a question of incompetence. Some of these people that are involved may not be competent. The process may not be competent. The system may not be competent. Of course, there could be shenanigans or games or fraud going on. That's always a possibility. But beyond that, again, I think the way to solve that is that as soon as these mail-in ballots start to appear, they get counted and tallied so that on Election Day, you basically already know what the mail-in ballots represent. So there's no suggestion that someone after Election Day goes out and tries to game the system by finding ballots that maybe weren't properly cast. And you never want to have even an inkling that sort of behavior is going on, because it hurts the entire democratic system. It hurts the entire electoral process. And nobody wants a situation where no one can trust the vote. Even if the vote's fair, you still want people to trust it and to believe in the system. Otherwise, I think the system gets hurt and ultimately can break down, and which is not good for anybody as I see it. Okay, hope you learned a little bit something. I'll see you guys on TV later tonight. Hope you guys are well. Very exciting day here in America. Hope the Second Amendment wins big time. Only time will tell if that happens. And again, if you haven't subscribed to the Four Boxes Diner, please do so. And we'll see you again soon here at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.